investigation goes forward and we get these answers and get to speak to them. Peter Licata, Commissioner Barksdale, grateful for your time on this sad day. Again, the haunting words, of course, it was not the right decision and that there were plenty to do what needed to be done. That, of course, was not done. And that is the grim news, the wrong decision. And do not forget, and you see right there, it's awful consequences. 19 children killed at school, 2 of their teachers killed as well. A glaring law enforcement error. We will continue to push for more answers. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your time today on this sad day. Ana Cabrera picks up our coverage right now.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Ana Cabrera in New York. The wrong decision. Just minutes ago, Texas officials released stunning new details on Tuesday's shooting rampage at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde. Chief among them, 19 law enforcement officers stood in a hallway outside the rooms where 19 school children and 2 teachers were slaughtered. They took no action to get into those classrooms as they waited for more equipment. CNN's Shimon Prokupecz pressed for more of an explanation, and the response was devastating. Listen.
Sir, you have people who are alive, children who are calling 911 saying, please send the police. They are alive in that classroom. There are lives that are at risk. That's not protocol, is it? Right, but why was this decision made not to go in and rescue these children?
Again, you know, the on-scene commander considered a barricaded subject, that there was time and there were no more children at risk.
And what time was that?
Obviously, you know, based upon the information we have, there were children in that classroom that were at risk, and it was, in fact, still an active shooter situation and not a barricaded subject.
Right, so, sir, if I can follow up. Sir.
What can you tell parents that were here waiting and asking for the police to go in?
Yeah, there was 19, like I said, there was 19 officers in there. In fact, there was plenty of officers to do whatever needed to be done, with one exception, is that the incident commander inside believed they needed more equipment and more officers to do a tactical breach at that point. That's why BORTAC was requested on the scene. As soon as they were there, they executed, they searched, or at least a dynamic entry, and went in, and of course, that was not till 12. That was not till 12:57. With the benefit of hindsight, stand by, right? I got it. Okay. Hey, from the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision. Period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, from what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can. Hey, when there's an active shooter, the rules change.
Let's bring in Shimon right now. Shimon, your exchange just now, that mistakes were made. That must be so heartbreaking for the parents of those students to hear.
Yeah, I bet it is. You know, we've seen the video of the parents who were outside the school on the day of the shooting. They knew something wasn't right by the way the police were reacting, right? They saw these officers standing outside while they themselves were hearing gunshots, wanting to go inside and rescue their kids, save their children. They were depending on the police to do that, and clearly that did not happen in this case. It took some pushing, took days of asking, but we finally have the answers because something did not add up here. Something just didn't make sense. And finally, after yesterday avoiding that question, we got our answer today, and the police admitting here that it was a mistake. They should have gone in. I have talked to several law enforcement officials, former. We've had people on our air. There is no sense in this kind of decision, a tactical decision to wait when students are inside a classroom with a man who is firing his gun. There is nothing tactical about that. The rules are what they say you do, and what the studies show is you get a team together and you get in there as quickly as you can to stop the threat. And clearly that did not happen here, and the police say so. And then, you know, this timeline for this hour of 911 calls from students, children inside the classroom, teachers, people calling, saying that there was a gunman inside, whispers, someone calling at 12:47 saying, please send the police. The police were here, but they just didn't go inside. They stood in the hallway. They were outside while these parents were screaming for help for their children. The big question now is obviously what's next? What kind of accountability will there be? What more can we learn about this police chief? He's the police chief of the school police. It's a very small department, 6 people. He's in charge of 4 police officers, a detective, and a security guard. And then there's him. And he is the one that was making this decision. He was the incident commander. So clearly, we need to know. We need to know what he was thinking. We need to know what kind of training he has received in these incidents. Why wasn't perhaps someone else making these decisions? We now know that the Border Patrol folks are on scene earlier. We need to find out if they wanted to go in and they were told they couldn't go in. There's still a lot of questions, but accountability certainly is next. And for these families, I cannot imagine, Anna, what they must be going through hearing this today. Because like all of us, I'm sure this was the first time that they were told of what happened. But they knew it. They knew it because they were out here that day and they could see it and they were trying to help their kids.
And just as far as this accountability goes, Shimon, I want our viewers to, again, just make sure they understand that the person who gave this press conference is the director of the Department of Public Safety for Texas, for the state agency. So you're talking about accountability also with the police chief for Uvalde, because it was those officers that initially responded and didn't go after that suspect inside what they said was a barricaded classroom, even though there were children still alive inside. I want you to stay with me, Shimon, because obviously there's some more new information we got at that press conference, but I do want to bring in Juliette Kayyem, who's with us as well. She's a CNN national security analyst and former assistant secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. And Juliette, I want to get your thoughts on this major news as we heard Shimon ask why officers didn't try to breach the barricaded classroom sooner. And he said, you know, the commander on scene considered a barricaded suspect and thought there was time and that there were no more children at risk. What's your reaction to that answer?
Well, so my reaction is rage that everyone's feeling, but let me take that out of the equation. So what we know now is that an incident command was set up. The incident commander made the most horrific decision and incorrect decision one makes in that situation, which is he made an assumption, and this is where your mind kind of wanders and goes, well, under what theory do you think someone armed in a classroom is actually in any way safe, alive? And he believes that it's a barricaded situation. And so he turns essentially this incident from an active shooter case in which rapid deployment response is the only right response, which is kill him. I mean, just as simple as that. You're killing him. This is everything that law enforcement has been trained for 20 years since Columbine. Yeah. That is not done. And he thinks that he's in a hostage situation. How he thinks that, we don't know, because simultaneously, one reporter in an answer to a question made it clear, simultaneously there are 911 calls going on saying kids are alive in this classroom. We also know that at least one child died at the hospital, so early help would have helped in that case. So I want to be clear, I'm not defending it. I have wondered for 3 days, absent evil, right? And maybe that was an explanation, but absent evil, what could explain this really inexplicable time frame? And this is the most reliable explanation we have gotten so far in a week in which all we've been hearing is inexplicable explanations. I'm not defending it, but now it begins, for someone like me who knows this world, it begins to make sense. The incident commander made a horrible, horrible mistake. That is essentially what we got out of this, and believed that there was no immediate threat. Erroneous, horrific. The consequences are now known, but it is the most reliable time frame that I have heard so far from a lot of spin from political and other actors throughout the week.
Juliet, just to be clear, when there is an active shooter, when do you storm, and when do you treat it as a hostage situation?
Yesterday, I mean, I'm not joking. I can't even explain to people well enough. Like, it's like there's not even a thought process going on. You are not weighing risk calculation when it comes to an active shooter situation. You're not thinking, oh, might he be okay? Might we be able to talk to him? We have learned, and this is like not new, 20 years of rapid deployment active shooter training is you're not asking questions. That's the point of it, is that person, the shooter, the gunman, has foregone any opportunity to explain himself, to live, to defend himself, to try to come up with an explanation. It is an active shooter situation. In limited circumstances, when you know that he is barricaded and not with victims, in other words, because around this situation you want to start saving victims, then you might, as the briefer said, you might what they call transition to a hostage situation or a barricade situation. These are little kids. It's not like there's it's not like they can defend themselves or try to get out on their own in other situations we have seen. So I just want to make clear that there are protocols for transitioning from active shooter to not active shooter, but there's no evidence yet what would justify in this case that transition when you have babies, infants, young children in a classroom. I mean, to be really stark about it, I mean, he basically made an assumption that all those kids were dead. And we know now that wasn't true. And it's inexplicable. And they said it was inexplicable without saying it directly.
And Shimon, obviously, it's been 3 days since the shooting, and the past 2+ days, we have received at times contradictory information about exactly what happened. And so here you have the director of the Texas Department of Public Safety attempting at this presser to give a minute-by-minute detailed timeline of the school shooting. And we don't know why exactly it took this long to get that detailed timeline, but does the timeline make sense now?
I think in the end right now, yes. I think there's going to be some changes, I'm sure, along the way, and perhaps maybe if we hear from the chief of police, though I'm not hopeful, that we will get more information as to what he was thinking and the things that he was seeing and what he was feeling to make this decision. I'm not sure the director here of DPS is in a position to talk about that. He didn't seem like he wanted to talk about. They may have interviewed him. We don't know. He should have been interviewed by now. But when you think about this situation, Anna, here, we continuously receive bad information from the police here almost immediately. That there was this resource officer on the scene. That wasn't the case. The timeline didn't quite add up. They wouldn't respond to a question, certainly yesterday, about that hour gap. So we were never getting a full account here from the beginning.
But on the resource officer, we have information now about that resource officer and what was going on. Fill us in on that.
Right. So that information is that that resource officer, they're investigating why that resource officer wasn't here. By all accounts, it seems like that resource officer should have been at the school and was in a car and responded after the calls were received to 911. They only spoke to the resource officer, we're told, on Wednesday. So the day after the shooting, they spoke to the resource officer, and that's when they learned that this resource officer was not on the scene as initially thought. We don't know why they initially thought that. I just want to make a point to what Juliet said about what police officers are supposed to do. You know, I was talking to a former law enforcement official who did this for a living. He was part of an NYPD emergency services unit. This is what they trained for. And he said, basically, I think he put it the best, is that you push to press the fight. That's what you're trained to do in these situations. You go, you fight, you get in there. And clearly that wasn't done here. And I think accountability is what everyone's going to be discussing now. And obviously, I think there are still a lot of questions. We need to know what the chief here of the school police was thinking and what the other officers were thinking. And perhaps, you know, for the families, they'll get those answers. But again, I think for the families, I can't imagine hearing this how they must feel.
All right, Juliet
If I could-
and Shimon, go ahead quickly, but we're going to come back and we're going to continue our conversation. But just
Okay,
to
great.
button
I
this
just
one
wanted
up. Go
to
ahead.
we could pick up on what Shimon was talking about that 12 minutes before he enters the school, because that also needs better explanation.
Okay, let's do that on the other side of this quick break, guys. Juliet Kayyem, Shimon, stay with us. Much more to discuss right after this.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks. And sometimes go down a path that's not marked.
Where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
These protests are a test for Hamas.
Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again.
The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks and security forces firing tear gas.
When you dare to take risks, you witness passion and persistence.
And they just want to get their past be processed so they can get out of this facility.
And that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief.
No nonsense.
How stupid do you think we are?
Facts first.
Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
Because getting to the truth matters. Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact Your World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate. By just clicking the button, be a part of the solution. Impact Your World.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks.
These protests are a test for Hamas.
Where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks.
Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again.
You witness persistence, and that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
Moments ago, Texas officials detailed the chilling timeline of the massacre in Uvalde, Texas, and described some of the 911 calls that children inside the school made. Listen.
At 12:19, the 911 call was made, and another person in room 111 called. I will not say her name. She hung up when another student told her to hang up. At 12:21, you could hear over the 911 call that 3 shots were fired. At 12:36, 911 call, it lasted for 21 seconds. The initial caller called back, student, child, called back, and was told to stay on the line and be very quiet. She told 911 that he shot the door. At approximately 12:43 and 12:47, she asked 911 to please send the police now. At 12:46, she said that she could hear the police next door. At 12:50, shots are fired. They can be heard over the 911 call. And at 12:51 is very loud and sounds like the officers are moving children out of the room. At that time, the first child that called was outside before the call cuts off.
Juliet and Shimon are both back with us now. Juliet, so at 12:15, this caller says there are 9 to 10 students still alive inside that classroom with the gunman. Another 30 or so minutes passes before law enforcement breach the classroom and kill the gunman. How does that happen?
Well, it shouldn't. And one of the reporters who asked the question, do we have a sense of how many died in that interim period? And the state official did not know and said, we're going to figure that out. Someone reminded me in the break that in medical care and emergency care, you have this concept of the golden hour, right? That it's just that time period of needing to get resources to people, to children who are harmed. And I think that is, we are going to see that in that period, it was still an active shooter situation because children could have been saved. They may have been harmed by them, but they could have been saved. And to be clear, I'm not a police officer, so I don't have this mind frame. I just want to be clear. They do. That's what they're trained for. And the mind frame is you're ignoring everything else. Everyone who needs help, all the phone calls, everything. And you're just going in on an active shooter case, rapid deployment, and you are eliminating the threat. Because once you eliminate the threat, then you can get resources in, like the parents who are trying to get in to help these kids. And this is going to be inexplicable. As I said, I'm not defending it. I'm trying to explain how wrong it is from the protocols, because some assumption was made that the situation was safe, right. and no one should be making that assumption. There's no risk calculation in rapid deployment. You're just going in, and that's what you're supposed to do.
It just seems like there's so many missed opportunities to have saved more lives here. And I want to back up, Shimon, to earlier in the timeline, because this was another period of time that just begs for more answers. Before the shooter even entered the school, we did learn that the school resource officer arrived at the scene, and we learned, according to the director here of public safety in the Department of Public Safety in Texas, that school resource officer actually drove past the gunman towards another person who turned out to be a teacher who was outside the school, but was responding knowing that there was an active shooter on school grounds, and that in fact this shooter was firing shots outside the school after the school resource officer arrived. So how did the shooter end up inside the school?
Right, and that's a great question also, Anna. What the police say is that the gunman was hunkered down behind a vehicle at 11:31 or so. He was hunkered down. The suspect, they say, was hunkered down behind a vehicle, insinuating that the resource officer missed the gunman. And that just minutes later, the gunman enters the school. We know the door was propped open by a teacher. A lot of this they know because they have video. They have video from inside the school, outside the school. They can hear the gunshots that were being fired on this video. There's audio that they now have describing some over 100 bullets, shots being fired. So they have all of this. They have the video. They have the fact that the teacher propped this door open. We need an explanation on that. Grabbing a phone, teacher was grabbing a phone, a cell phone. So there's a lot of questions, obviously, on that as well. And those crucial beginning moments of when the resource officer eventually arrives. What does the resource officer do? What happens in those moments are very crucial, because those are the beginning stages of this incident, what allowed the gunman to eventually enter the school, and then we know what happens.
Juliet, we know that Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro is asking the FBI to conduct a federal investigation into the law enforcement response, especially given all the contradictory information we've received in the past few days. Do you think a federal investigation into the response and the timeline is warranted?
I think an independent investigation is warranted. What entity it is, I don't know at this stage. Maybe FBI or some other entity within Department of Justice. This is a police department that receives federal funds. Presumably there is some federal nexus to justify, or at least to get investigators in, and hopefully the state, unlikely, but the state would want to welcome it at this stage. Because I think exactly what you're saying, Anna, and outside of the political lane, it's just important that we understand how momentous the last hour has been to undermine two narratives that had already sort of creeped up. One was sort of the more weapons will help in schools. And I think what we're seeing here is you really couldn't have had more weapons in this school. You had lots of police officers with weapons, that it really does come down to human conduct and courage and training, and one aspect of that is just trying to lower the possibility that someone can enter a school and kill children that quickly. The second narrative that is just very important that was undermined today was the narrative that it could have been worse. I'm just quoting Governor Abbott, this idea that but for the public safety entities. In some ways that's obviously true, right? It could have been worse, more kids could have been killed, but that, as public officials, that really shouldn't be our standard. Our standard should be, could it have been less bad? Could we have made it better? And I think that now, after an hour ago, we now know that to be true, that it actually could have been a lot better, that decision to end rapid deployment and to kill the gunman, period, no calculations, no questions, no negotiations, just kill him. That decision to turn it into a barricade ultimately resulted in more harm than if they had followed the protocols.
Shimon, final thought?
An independent investigation. I asked the police here, the director here of DPS, he wouldn't answer that question. But that is why I asked the FBI to take the podium. They don't have jurisdiction right now, so it would involve some kind of effort by either a local entity. It's a little complicated, but certainly I think the families are going to want an independent investigation. It makes sense for one, but we asked. This was a question that I kept asking. Will there be an independent investigation? Unclear. Certainly I'm sure the families would want one, because we need a better accounting of certainly this issue, the fact that the police here, the chief of police for the school, decided to treat this is law enforcement language, right? You treat this as a barricaded situation instead of an active shooter type situation. Those are two different things, and that we need some explanation from the incident commander who was here making that decision. That person needs to explain why they made that decision.
Shimon, keep asking the tough questions. Thank you for all your hard work there in Uvalde. And Juliet Kayyem, thank you for your expertise and insights and being part of this discussion. We'll be right back.
sniper fire, gunfire. You can see how intense it is.
We have to wrap it up right now.
They feel like they won't be able to outrun the war.
They thought the whole border was open. These doctors have nerves of steel.
You can't help but be struck by how interconnected our world is.
Arwa Damon, CNN.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of a camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
So great that you're here today. It just highlights what's making a difference.
That you'll be honest.
I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them?
Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair.
It was an unprecedented move. Very eerie. All the roads have been closed off.
Describe the theme that you arrived to. The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying. Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now?
Huge amounts of police support coming into this protest.
We continue to monitor the government in crisis.
This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed.
That's what it's all about.
Max Foster, CNN.
South Korea's new president, Yoon Suk-yeol, sits down with CNN in an exclusive interview. Fresh from an international summit with US President Biden. See what this former prosecutor has to say about the threat of North Korea.
What would your message to Kim Jong-un be?
Plus, his thoughts on the new American-led economic pact to counter a rising China.
Are you anticipating a new kind of relationship with China?
Talk Asia, Saturday on CNN.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief.
No nonsense.
How stupid do you think we are?
Facts first.
Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
Because getting to the truth matters. Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
I'm Mindy Kincaid in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
Welcome back. We'll continue our coverage out of Texas in a moment, but a couple other headlines now. Parents are still struggling to find baby formula. According to one estimate, 70% of infant formula products nationwide were out of stock at some point last week. So this crisis is far from over. CNN senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen is joining us with more details here. Elizabeth, when are parents who rely on this formula to feed their children going to get some relief?
Anna, it's really impossible to predict, but I think we can safely say it is not going to be immediately. Let's take a look at two new developments that bring hope, but not immediate hope. So the food giant Dannon is going to ship from Europe enough formula for 5.3 million 8-ounce bottles to the U.S., but that's by the end of June. Let's hope that date moves up some. Also, Abbott, the plant here in the United States, will reopen that plant and will have formula available on or around June 20th. Again, let's hope that that date moves up. Anna, in both cases, these will be specialized formula for children with allergies, since those parents have been having the toughest time finding a formula that works for their children. Anna?
Elizabeth, thank you for that update. And if you are hitting the road this holiday weekend, brace yourself. The average price for regular gas is at an all-time high, $4.60 per gallon. It's not stopping an estimated 40 million people from traveling this weekend, but as CNN's Pete Muntean reports, for some people, the price is too high.
Anna, the traffic is building here on Interstate 395 in D.C., and so is the expense, kicking off this busy Memorial Day travel period and the start of the summer travel season. $4.60, according to AAA. That's the national average for a gallon of regular gas. It is so expensive, and so many things are going up. Food, hotels, airfare, and this is only just the start.
Single dad Eric Stevens says he makes $110,000 a year, but even that is not enough to afford a trip to the lake. Here in Los Angeles, $6 a gallon gas has kept his plans in park.
Maybe for the affluent, they can afford it, but for me to go anywhere is minimum a $200 decision in regards to gas, and you haven't fed your kids or done anything else.
Gas Buddy says holiday weekend gas prices are the highest they have been since 2012, but the pain goes beyond the pump. New data says hotels have jumped 42% compared to last year. Airfare is up 6%.
This will likely be one of the most expensive Memorial Day travel periods we've ever seen.
Even still, AAA thinks Americans will not be stopped traveling to top destinations such as Orlando, Seattle, Miami, and Las Vegas. The latest projection, 34.9 million people will drive 50 miles or more over the 5 days around Memorial Day.
Do you think that the numbers will be all that far off from the projection?
You know, our projections have always been pretty accurate, but we've never been trying to project in an environment like this.
The new fear is this expensive start to summer travel could last. Gas Buddy's Patrick DeHaan thinks the average price of gas will not dip below $4.50 for months.
I don't really think the higher price of fuel is going to slow down many. It may slow down some, but certainly there's still a very healthy appetite to hit the road this summer.
You ready for school, baby girl?
Not so for Eric Stevens, who says he's choosing to pay for his daughter's daycare over a road trip.
Fun has been postponed for the indefinite future, especially the way things are going. While I'd like to say or hope there's an end in sight, I just don't see one.
One more data point here, Anna. When you adjust the gas price right now for inflation, this is the highest we have seen gas prices since Memorial Day 2012. On the roads, it's going to feel a lot more like 2019. The point is, you got to be patient and really pad your wallet. This trip is going to cost you. Anna?
Pete Muntean, thank you. Up next, an 11-year-old girl shares her story. What happened the moment the shooter entered her classroom, the final word he uttered to her teacher, and how she survived. The stunning details just ahead. And what happens long after the news cameras are gone and the victims are buried. How do these children cope in the future with such a tragic past?
I got really scared and I didn't know who was her or dead, and then we started looking around on Facebook, and then I realized that all the people I knew were dead now.
What do you mean, baby? How many?
I knew all of them.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks, and sometimes go down a path that's not marked.
Where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
These protests are a test for Hamas.
Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again.
The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks and security forces firing tear gas.
When you dare to take risks, you witness passion and persistence.
And they just want to get their past be processed so they can get out of this facility.
And that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
I'm Linda Kincaid in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief.
No nonsense.
How stupid do you think we are?
Facts first.
Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
Because getting to the truth matters. Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
I'm Linda Kincaid in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact Your World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate. By just clicking the button, be a part of the solution. Impact Your World.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks.
These protests are a test for Hamas, where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks. Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again.
You witness persistence, and that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
Now to a CNN exclusive. An 11-year-old survivor describes being in the classroom the gunman first entered. Mia Cerrillo didn't want to go on camera, but she did want to share her story with the world. And my colleague Nora News, a producer here at CNN, sat down with Mia and talked about their conversation.
One of her teachers got an email that there was a shooter in the building and went to the door, and he was right there. And they made eye contact.
The shooter made eye contact with the
teacher. And then he shot out the window in the door. And then Mia says it just happened all so fast. He backed the teacher into the classroom. And he made eye contact with the teacher again, looked her right in the eye and said, "Good night," and then shot her and killed her.
He said good night before he shot her.
Good night. And then it happened pretty fast after that as well. He started open firing in the classroom. He hit the other teacher, a lot of Mia's friends. At that point, Mia was hit by fragments of the bullets. You could even see them yesterday. I mean, on her back, on her shoulders, the back of her head.
The shooter then, she says, went into the adjoining classroom.
Yeah, so he went through this door to the adjoining classroom, and at that point, Mia could hear screams. She heard a lot more gunfire. And then she said she heard music. She thinks it was the gunman that put it on. he started blasting sad music. And I asked her, like, what was that? Like, what kind of music? What do you mean by that? And she just said it sounded like I want people to die music.
What did Mia do then?
So she had a friend next to her that she was pretty sure was already dead and was laying on the ground bleeding out. And she put her hands in her friend's blood and then smeared it, she said, all over her body. She wanted to look like she was dead. She was scared that the gunman was going to come back through that adjoining door back into the classroom, and she wanted to be able to play dead.
She also told you that she called 911.
Yeah, so after she smeared the blood all over her body, she and a friend went and were able to take the phone off of one of the teachers who had already been killed. And they called 911, and they were actually able to make contact with the dispatcher. And they talked to a dispatcher for a little while and told them what was going on inside. And Mia kept telling me that she kept saying, we're in trouble, like, please come, we're in trouble.
And again, Mia Cerrillo didn't want to go on camera, but she did want to get that out. We were told she didn't want to speak to a male because of fear. She would only talk with a female. And after that, we're also learning Mia's family says they are planning to get her into therapy. And joining us now is Joel Dvoskin. He's a clinical and forensic psychologist and professor at the University of Arizona. Joel, thanks for being here. I think you have such an important role in helping all of us through the trauma, especially those families that are impacted firsthand. That little girl and the other kids, so many experienced, just incredible trauma inside that school. It's horrific. Your advice for their parents as they help them move forward?
Well, I think to not think of it in the short run, first of all, that whatever help kids will need should be thought about over a significant amount of time. It could be weeks or months or years. Often when there's a community tragedy like this, a lot of help comes flowing into the area where it happened for a brief amount of time, but often people can't really talk about it right after it happens. But they might 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later. The second thing is to let them take the lead and to do more listening than talking. Like your grandmother said, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. The more that people can talk at their own pace, that means an ability for us helpers to tolerate silence and to give people time to answer in the best way that they can. Probably as much as anything, I would say, do not lie. It's so tempting to want to give kids comforting lies, but they need to trust you now more than they ever have in their life. And if you lie, they're smart. They're way smarter than we think they are, and they're going to figure out that we lied, and then they won't believe anything. The last thing I would say is when a kid asks a question is just answer the question. Don't tell them everything you know. Let them kind of drive how much detail they want.
Okay, appreciate all of that good information. Mental health is such a critical problem that needs to be addressed in this nation right now. We are told the gunman in Uvalde dropped out of high school. Sounds like he had sketchy attendance while he was there. He's been described as being bullied, violent at times, a loner. Are these warning signs, and how could they be addressed?
You know, one of the biggest myths that you hear over and over again is that, there's warning signs. It's obvious the person had this, this, and this. There are some characteristics or situations that you see repeatedly in these kinds of cases, but they're so vague that they apply to lots and lots of people. Millions of people dropped out of school. They probably need help, but they're not going to shoot anybody. Same thing with the other characteristics that you see. You see depression or anger. Well, lots of people are depressed and lots of people are angry, and they should get help. But it doesn't mean they're going to shoot anybody. So the notion that we can predict this stuff before it happens, I think is really disingenuous. That what we're doing is, we already know what happened, so now we look back and explain it. The phrase Monday morning quarterbacking comes to mind, that nobody was calling the police to say, hey, this guy's going to do something, because we didn't know that, except for threats. Threats are really meaningful warning signs, and all threats should be taken seriously.
Well, I think everybody tries to look back and see what possible signs may have been missed, to try to learn from this experience, to try to make sense of how someone could do such a monstrous thing. Joel Dvoskin, thank you so much for lending your expertise to us. We'll be right back.
They've been coming across sniper fire, gunfire. You can see how intense it is. We have to wrap it up right now.
They feel like they won't be able to outrun the war.
They thought the whole border was open. These doctors have nerves of steel.
You can't help but be struck by how interconnected our world is.
Arwa Damon, CNN.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of a camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
It's so great that you're here today. It just highlights what's making a difference.
That you'll be honest.
I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them?
Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair.
It was an unprecedented move. Very eerie. All the roads have been closed off.
Describe the theme that you arrived to.
The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying.
Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now?
Huge amounts of police support coming into this protest.
We continue to monitor the government in crisis.
This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed.
That's what it's all about.
Max Foster, CNN.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief.
No nonsense.
How stupid do you think we are?
Facts first.
Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
Because getting to the truth matters. Erin Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
I'm Mindy Kincaid in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
I want to bring you up to speed with developments out of the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainian Air Force says it shot down a Russian fighter over Kherson. But to the east, Russian forces reportedly are gaining ground. Meanwhile, multiple sources say the Biden administration plans to send new weapons to Ukraine. Let me bring in CNN's Suzanne Malveaux live for us there. And Suzanne, we're getting these reports that Russia is depositing